morning to all of you, and we have been in this series called ETHOS, Sacred Values for a Struggling World. And if you've been hanging around Aldea for a while, you might have noticed that every now and again we like to have an interview-style conversation where we can get to know someone who might be new for us in this community, but who is active in the local community. And I thought this would just be a fantastic opportunity to introduce my new friend, Jaden Hawkinson, to you all. Would you welcome him today? As we've been talking about values, I am so grateful to have made a friend who is in this wonderful field of holistic medicine. And I think that this idea of approaching life from a holistic perspective can just be so transformative for us. And I think is a value that we need moving forward and as we kind of reimagine collective life together. So I wanted to bring in someone who has really deep wisdom about naturopathic medicine, Eastern medicine, and just sort of this alternative holistic path. And so I wanted to use this as an opportunity not only to introduce you to the community, but I get to learn more about your story, which is really exciting. And so I just start by asking, what was your journey like? How did you get into naturopathic medicine? Because I imagine this isn't just something that people jump into on a whim, or you're at a career fair and it's like, hey, would you like to study Eastern medicine and become a naturopathic doctor? It's like, here, just sign up here. I don't think it's that simple. So I would love to learn more about your story, your journey, and what led you down this path.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jake, for inviting me here. It's a really sweet honor to be here with all of you. Locally, I practice at Genesis Natural Medicine Center. Moved to Tucson just about a year ago to be of service to the Tucson community, and I hope to be here for a very, very long time, keeping everyone healthy and happy. Something that really interests me is what we do when we're feeling 110%, when any of our health ailments are not ailing us, but that we're feeling a vigorous sense of vitality, and then we can put our gifts and talents out into the world and create beautiful art and come together as community and celebrate. And just allowing people to understand what resources are available to them, and really how to tie in together a complex web of a healthcare system, how to use herbs and diet and just understanding how to regulate the emotions appropriately. So I really appreciate the videos that were shared today. The mystery of the heart is something that's very dear to me, especially in relation with Chinese and Eastern medicine. The heart is considered the emperor, empress of the body, and the heart is really what calls the shots for the entire organ network, and all of the organs are in relationship with the heart. And the Gabor Mate interview too, also very important. And he said, it's 60, 70 years old, but the psychoimmunologic system in Eastern medicine is very well established, and there's been writings on it that are well translated for 2,000 years. And as I'm here today on Father's Day, I'd say I'd like to just give a lot of credit to my mom and dad. Today, especially my dad. My dad's a pharmacist, so our dinner table conversations growing up were a lot about health and medicine, and he is a retail pharmacist. He's down in Sahuarita now at Safeway, and just growing up, we were able to have these conversations about what kind of medications people were on, what kind of foods people were buying at the grocery store, and just slowly able to connect the dots, seeing the wisdom in the pharmacologic use of medicine, but then also where its limitations were, and then trying to figure out ways to best support the body. So that's kind of what got my mind thinking in this direction. And then really from a spiritual perspective, when I was 16, I went to a lot of funerals that year, maybe 6 or 7 funerals. And some were from friends of mine, some were from uncles and my grandmother and great-grandmother, and nothing that rocked me too much emotionally because they were distant enough. But it really helped me recognize that our time here on earth is very finite, and what we do with our time matters. And that led me to just seek more spiritual traditions and develop a meditation practice. And through that, I found these spiritual teachings that led me to study religion as an undergrad, so world religions, and traveling to India and China to be with teachers there and learn directly from them. And then through a course of events, was led to study naturopathic medicine in Portland, Oregon. And originally, up until that point, I was planning on becoming an orthodontist because I was interested in smiles, and I thought, oh my gosh, if I could just crank out all these smiles, everybody would just be having a great time. Like if we just all have beautiful smiles, we're just hanging out and feeling relaxed, because we know, when you smile, you feel better. And if you have a smile you feel great about, you're going to smile more. But then I learned that naturopathic medicine existed and that it could be studied, and you can become a proper licensed physician, and that you would have a full scope. You can prescribe pharmaceuticals, but you know everything to do before pharmaceuticals, or how to take people off of their medications too, or support them with side effects. So then I shifted my gear to naturopathic and Chinese medicine school, so that people could feel as good as they can in their bodies, and they just can't help to smile because they feel good and they're relaxed. Yeah.
So the smiles part is still there.
Still there.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
When we talk about sort of these different forms of approaching health, I know sometimes our more traditional standard Western medicine practice sometimes overlooks the fact that there is a whole body, spirit, mind system that really is what's at play with our health. Like we described the heart, and we described, as Gabor Mate conveyed to us, the idea that our emotions, our psychology affects our physicality. So the word that, again, that really is rising to the forefront today is holistic, or this perspective of holism, seeing our health, seeing our well-being, not just as compartmentalized, okay, it's just physical, so you have this ailment, so just figure out the ailment, but recognizing these different layers of what we are as human beings, right? We are these vast, multi-dimensional beings. And so as you approach holism and this idea of being holistic in your practice, like, how do you define that? What does that word mean to you? How do you approach it, not only in your professional life, but in your personal spiritual life?
Good question. For me, holism really is taking into account the whole person that's in front, everything that brought them to this moment where they're interacting with me, and then even our interaction has a holism dynamic too, because as you know, you vibe different with different people based on each individual person in that moment. So for me, I really, like to know somebody very well. What are their social connections? What food are they eating? What emotions tend to be at the forefront, because that can even give clues to different organ systems. There's different pattern differentiation. So some people might have a stomach ache because they're nervous all the time, and we need to work on giving them tools to calm their nervous system. Could be as simple as a breathing exercise. Some people might have an organism that shouldn't be living in their digestive tract that is there, and that then needs to be addressed, because then that can be affecting their mental health. So in terms of holism, it's really just taking into account the entire person and figuring out where the gentlest approach that has the biggest effect can be. If we're to drop a single pebble in a pond and create a ripple effect, where's the best place to drop that pebble to achieve long-lasting health?
So in the kind of work that you do, you're approaching this whole human being perspective, and you are, really essentially trying to get people to the best state of being, right? And we've been having this conversation over the past couple of months of really how to, using values, like using a life of values, how we can try to reach this best version of ourselves, this best version of community. And so I'm curious, just doing this work, and really just in your life in general, beyond just this holism, what are some other maybe values, or even sort of an ethos, if you will, or multiple perhaps mottos, just with ways that framing devices that have really helped you as a human, as a physician?
I think the healing power of nature is something that's worth meditating on, and is definitely a guiding principle in my life. In nature, everything is taken care of, and it's gentle and easy, and maybe it needs a little support here and there. But one of the components of the healing power of nature that I think about is like when we cut our finger, and we don't have to think to heal that. Our body knows how to heal that. So that's one principle that I apply to the embodied version of the healing power of nature, understanding that there's nothing in nature that's not also in us, and that we are nature. We're not separate from it. And we have a whole environment inside of us that can be like nature. Earth is the body, and the blood is the water, the rivers, and how all of those things are connected and flow. Some other values that I think that are really important are the value of service and being of service to the person in front of you, to the community that we're with. So really the value of service in and of itself, how to serve the person that's here. And then nonviolence as well. So especially as a physician, really taking do no harm very seriously as a principle of nonviolence, and letting that also guide me through life too. And I think in terms of doing no harm and nonviolence, what I also think about then is I think about a lot in terms of side effects versus side benefits. So for a lot of the treatments that I administer, or the herbs that I give, or supplements, or even pharmaceutical drugs, I think about the side benefits that those are going to have, rather than side effects that are more detrimental. So even if we give one herb or a combination of herbs or a Chinese formula for the heart, I know that that's not just going to affect somebody's heart, that's going to affect all of their vasculature. It's going to help out their liver, because all of our blood passes through our liver every 3 to 5 minutes. I know that if their blood is flowing better, their hands are going to be warm, and they're going to have more vitality to show up in their life. So that's another principle of just, where to add in something that's going to have the most ripple effect of side benefits for a person. And I think about that in my relationships as well. Thoughts, words, actions that will have a positive ripple effect.
I think that's beautiful. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that, about because again, we're in this system that's often like, well, if you want to feel better, you're going to have to deal with all these side effects, and so it feels like this, almost like a lose-lose kind of situation so often in medicine, but maybe we even approach relationships the same way. So I'd love if you could even just expand a little bit on how you approach relationship and one's life by trying to focus on the tools, practices, or even just things that we might do for each other and ourselves that maximize the good and minimize the bad. Like what's a compass for you of how you even find, how you navigate and you determine what's going to serve in that way?
Right. Well, I think one of those things is just listening to teachers and people who have come before. We don't live in a vacuum, and I think, listening to people who have a lot of experience in the realm of relationship is important. Knowing that, like the quote about, being silent when you don't know what to say from that beautiful prayer, I think that goes a long way as well as a form of nonviolence. So often, if we get thrown off guard or we're feeling that sense of urgency, that's often when we misspeak, or we might say the right thing, but we say it in a way that doesn't resonate with the other person, and then that can create a negative ripple effect. So I think just taking that time, to be with ourselves and have a meditative or contemplative practice so that we can show up and respond dynamically in a way that doesn't cause harm is really important.
I like that idea of just being sensitive and listening. And as you were speaking, it reminded me that something that I've been really working on and am still just very much in the process of is that this skill of listening to my own body or my own heart. I feel like our Western society often, through just the way that we are brought up and all that we experience, we become so detached, we become so disassociated that we often have a hard time accessing the reality of our own feelings, the reality of what's going on in our body. And so I'm sure that, you probably have patients come in who you can recognize maybe are having a hard time even being sensitive and aware to what's going on in their system. How do you work with that? What do you say to just a culture in general that has difficulty with that, and sort of what might be our road back?
The road back to sensitivity in the body.
Yeah, just like, what does it mean to listen to your body? I mean, that's just a concept that I feel like is perhaps foreign for a lot of us, and let alone listen to my deep feeling in a situation. We're taught to often, in many ways, suppress what we're feeling, or suppress the wisdom of our body. It feels this way. This seems to be the culture that we're living in. I feel like we might not be facing all the discord that we were if we could actually just be sensitive to what's truly going on within ourselves. And so what are just some starting points for listening to the body, listening to the soul, the heart, and how those are speaking within us?
Right. I think, taking even just 1 minute a day to feel your heartbeat and understand that we have a heartbeat, and to find that and then to follow that. Even just, 1 minute of silence goes a really, really long way. And any type of movement practice, whether it's yoga or just a little bit of shaking every morning, some light stretching, things that connect us to our physical body. And then the more we cultivate that relationship with the body, the more we can understand what's, talking loudly and needs attention, and when to ask for help, and what things are just, the stomach gurgling. And
So, something that you mentioned before is that your dad is a pharmacist, and I find that really fascinating because, you and him have chosen, in some ways, similar paths, and then in some ways, unique paths. And I tend to think that when we have conversations about alternative medicine or Eastern medicine, I think that we too easily create this polarity, this dynamic of you're either one side or the other, that you can only appreciate one or the other. Can feel very dualistic and confrontational at times. And so there might even be people here who are like Western medicine has saved my life, so I don't know how to process what's being talked about today. But you have this relationship in your own life that represents this dynamic. So I'm curious if you could share maybe what that's looked like between you and your father a little bit, how you maybe supported each other, and how that maybe is a microcosm for the larger dynamic between what we might consider modern Western medicine and Eastern medicine, and how do you marry the two? I mean, you're able to prescribe medication, you do, so obviously there's some level of convergence there.
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with what in naturopathic medicine we call the therapeutic order. So it's just understanding, are we establishing the foundations of health, good exercise, clean water, clean food? Are all the organ levels working properly for detoxification? Are there any organ systems that need support? And then are there any symptoms that a person's feeling that need to be suppressed with either natural or pharmaceutical agents? And then above that would be like surgeries. So knowing where we're coming in on a therapeutic order is important, as well as being able to marry those as you go. So in our family, for example, between myself and my dad, my mom was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis after my younger sister was born. And, there's a period of time where she was on a lot of these medications that do have some pretty intense side effects, but offer great symptom relief. But over time, we were able to work together, and we were able to get her off of those medications, and she's feeling very healthy in her body now. And so even in our family unit, we practice this style of medicine and have these discussions together. And I try to approach each person I work with as though they are a family member. And I think that's one of the most ethical ways to practice.
So, in a lot of ways we envision, as society seems to be going through a lot of birthing pains of kind of a new way, and we like to really imagine here, what are all these different ways that society might reimagine itself, the collective might reimagine itself. And so when I think about health and medicine, this is one of those arenas. And, it's interesting because it's not that we're, a lot of what you're working with is thousands of years old, right? And there's wisdom in returning to the past. Mm-hmm. And there's also aspects in which modern technology, modern awareness and science has also benefited us. So do you see, when you look at perhaps the ideal future of how medicine is mm-hmm. in the world, how we think about health, how we think about the body, do you see some sort of marriage between modern and ancient, Eastern and Western? Yeah. How do we find the non-duality there?
Mm-hmm. So that's where working with any kind of qualified practitioner that knows how to be a bridge between all these different worlds and also work with other practitioners and have a good referral network is important. And I definitely think that's the physician of the future knows how to navigate these different worlds. And there's so many different tools and so much information and misinformation that it's important to work with a team and keep a whole team together. So for the modern era, or like currently, that looks like, for like a cancer patient, for example, you want to have a great medical oncologist on board. You want to have a good surgical oncologist, your primary care provider, a naturopathic doctor, an acupuncturist, and you want to have access to all the therapies that are offered and the treatments that are offered by those people, and have a way of navigating them also that they're in the service of you and your health and your body.
Yeah. So, something that we often talk about here, one of the ways that we frame our conversations is that, yes, there are people who we can look at as healers and guides, but in many ways, they're just creating the space for us to heal, right? Like, in a lot of ways, you're creating a container for our bodies to do that work, So how do you see this idea of, healing as something that really is happening within the individual, and perhaps that the individual needs to take full responsibility for, instead of outsourcing all their agency to, because of course, like you said, it's such a wonderful thing to have a team of people on your side and caring for you. And yet there's also this understanding that I think can really be found in this holistic perspective, which is that we also are the healers. We are responsible. And does that come up in your work? How do you approach that kind of conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're only at a doctor's visit, even if you're receiving treatment for a couple hours a week maximum, if even that. And then oftentimes interacting with or receiving some education from a doctor, you're only in the room for if you see me, you're in the room for like 2 hours for an initial visit, and then 30-minute follow-ups while we're teasing out a lot of these different components of how to support the body at home. But the majority of time you're at home and you're in your routines, and there's a lot of self-agency that needs to be at play. And I think that's important for everyone to take ownership of. Is nobody can wake up and do what you need to do except for you. No one's going to do it for you. And yeah, so I think the agency and the self-healing is really dynamic and crucial. And having a community of people that are able to support you in that process. It's much easier to, get your exercise in if you have somebody that you run with, or somebody that you walk with, somebody that you talk with, rather than just doing it all on your own. Because we don't live alone, and the community makes healing work a lot better.
So spirituality can be a loaded term, and I'm sure, as you're working with a variety of different types of people, that, you probably are sensitive to how you approach those conversations, people with, diverse religious backgrounds. But I can also imagine that in your work, there is a value in, encouraging people to have some sort of deeper connection or deeper meaning. So whether or not you'd name it as spirituality specifically, does that, as you're working with people, does the idea of one's, spiritual life, named like that or not, come up? Do you bring that in any way, or encourage people to perhaps approach some practices or some pathways that we might consider to be more spiritual in nature? And maybe as you answer that, just giving us a glimpse in how we all can think about our spirituality as actually a part of our larger health in general.
Right. So I think one of the things that spirituality offers, and what I encourage everybody to cultivate, is a sense of awe for life itself, the miracle of life. As much as we know about the human body, we don't know much at all, and that's just the truth of it, is that this body is a miracle. The fact that we can have conversations and process the human experience is, just having that sense of awe towards life, I think, is the most basic form of spirituality that definitely has a great physiologic effect in the body, of just allowing ourselves to surrender to something bigger than ourselves, and know that even anything that ails us, it's not necessarily ours. We didn't do anything that made us deserve it. That we come into this world through parents and genetics and environment, and having that sense of awe just relaxes the body and allows everything to flow so much better. And then in terms of practices, at the clinic I offer a Qigong course once a week, and that's a more spiritual exercise routine. So I was taught by my teachers, and I met my teacher's teachers, Master Wang, in China a few years ago, and we studied at a monastery there. And it's an old lineage that was passed down teacher to student. Master Wang is 85 years old now, and he completed his sessions with his teacher by the time he was 12, and then the Cultural Revolution happened, and then he had a whole journey in prison labor camps, and he was able to come out of all of that with a really big sense of love and a really well cultivated physiology and chi dynamic in his body. So those are the teachings that I transmit through these specific movement practices. Then anything can be made into a Qigong practice. That's one of the things he taught us, as long as we're combining our breath with the visualization and with movement. So breath, visualization, and movement, we can make anything a Qigong experience, and that's going to work on our body, mind, and our spirit. So even just sitting here and breathing, this in and of itself can be very cultivating and very healing for the body, or as we go on our walks in the evenings when it cools down, or early in the mornings. Just combining the breath, the visualization with any movement.
So obviously, we're in a big group right now. You're not having an opportunity to do what you normally would do, which is work one-on-one with someone and really get down to the root of what's going on with them. Mm-hmm. And also, obviously with a group like this, it's not that the majority of us are going to go home and tonight, completely radically change our lives, change our diet, whatever. We're going to keep going as business as usual. And so in a lot of ways, our Sunday experience is about, what is that one tidbit that we can walk away with that might, we add to our life experience, that maybe if it's just one, if tomorrow I can do things 1% better, that will be a win, And so just as just to give some kind of closing advice, what's maybe just something or a couple things that are simple and accessible that we can do, immediately, and might not be too hard for us to do, that can already have an impact on our holistic well-being that we may just not have thought about, and whether that's spiritual, physical, emotional, or some combination.
Well, I think back to Hippocrates made the quote of "do no harm," and then the other part of that sentence that's not often taught or talked about is, "and figure out which foods the patient can eat." So everybody has a different, very unique digestive system that's been cultivated and built over a long period of time, but I think we all know which foods are more helpful or feel good for us, and which ones aren't. So just thinking, every time we're eating, which bacteria are we feeding? How do we feel after we eat? And then if we're able to rest a little bit after we eat or take a walk, and just cultivating gratitude, and even just taking at least a moment before every time we eat of having gratitude for the food, it begins to shift the nervous system more into that rest and digest, parasympathetic. And so that would be the one thing, would be to chew your food at least 40 times per bite, and put your fork down between each bite. Yeah. That's an extreme. So just, trend in that direction is the way to go.
Wow. Well, I know that, just speaking for everyone, I can imagine there's just such deep gratitude in this room that you would share your experience, your story, and your wisdom with us. So would we just, thank Jaden for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.
So I want to do something somewhat unique. As you may have experienced before, at this point, we will formally end our gathering together. And I want to thank those of you. Oh, that's right. Before I forget, people, I can imagine a room this size, there are going to be people that would like to learn more about your work, perhaps connect with you. We have information, and people have already pulled out their phones. So do you want to share a little bit about these links or how people can get in touch with you?
Sure. So JadenHawkinson.com is my website. There's information on me on there. GenesisNMC.com is where I practice. My fiance Noelle also practices there as a massage therapist, lymphatic specialist, abdominal massage therapist. We have a number of practitioners at Genesis, and it's a really wonderful, homey community. We have lots of great services, from IV therapies and lots of unique blood tests. Like there's food sensitivity tests that y'all can do, and if you want to figure out what foods your immune system is reacting to. So yeah, there's just a wealth. Genesis is a really great resource for the community of Tucson, and that's the reason I moved here, was to participate at this clinic. And yeah, I'm really grateful for it. And really great front office, and calling is the best way to get information.
Very
So
cool.
thank you.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to close and dismiss our time together, and just thank you for participating and joining us. And I just wish you a wonderful Sunday in that 110-degree weather, as best as you can. That's a part of holistic health, too, is not overheating.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.
Electrolytes go a long way.
What we're going to do, though, right now is we're going to just take a few minutes. And if you would like to stick around, again, this is the formal end of service, but if you would like to stick around, we're going to just open up some time for some Q&A with Jaden. It's a real gift to have someone with his level of wisdom and expertise and training. And so after this 2-minute countdown, if you have decided to remain in this room, we're going to do maybe about 15 or so minutes of Q&A. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Stay hydrated.